Hello friends, welcome back to another video and a special hello if you're new. My name is Casey and today I'm going to be sharing with you some of my favorite coming of age stories. Coming of age stories are my favorite kinds of stories. I love any type of really strong character driven story. They are always the ones that tend to stick with me the most, but there's just something extra special about coming of age stories. I just feel that it really helps you transport yourself into that character's life, and you get to learn about so many different circumstances and cultures and ways of living that can be very different from yours. I have some contemporary work, I have some older books, I have some series, I have some nonfiction. We have a little bit of everything here, so we'll go ahead and get to it. Also, as always, I can never rank books or come up with a good way of sharing them, so they're alphabetized. But I think it's very fitting because the first book that I want to share with you is A Tree Grows in Brooklyn by Betty Smith, which is my favorite book of all time. If you want to get to know me and my heart, you just have to read this book. I almost feel vulnerable talking about it because it is so personal to me. It is just, this is me on the pages, but it tells the story of Francie. She is a third generation immigrant growing up in Williamsburg within Brooklyn in New York. I think the story starts off in 1912. So it follows her from her childhood up into, I think, late adolescence to young adulthood. The characters in this book are so incredibly human, and even though they may not be the best character or the best person, my heart aches for them all. For example, Francie's father is an alcoholic, but my heart aches for Johnny Nolan. I have sobbed multiple times reading this book because of Johnny. And there's Francie's Aunt Sissy, who kind of likes men and gets married to lots of different men, and it's kind of quite scandalous. But again, you just see these characters as just incredibly human, and you understand them and why they are the way that they are, and you don't feel any type of resentment or anger. Francie is a character who finds a lot of solace within the books that she reads. If you clicked on this video, you probably do too, and will find that extremely relatable. It really highlights poverty and the circumstances that she grew up in, and kind of people that have had to harden themselves to survive in this world, and how even though they may there's a scene in here where Francie and her brother are getting a Christmas tree, and the man is hurling insults at them, but it's Francie knows that that man's actually saying God bless you, Merry Christmas, because these people have had to harden themselves and are forcing the children to become hardened to survive within this world, and Francie kind of is against that. It's called A Tree Grows in Brooklyn because there is a metaphor about Francie and a tree that is growing out of the pavement within the city in Brooklyn, and how people are oh, you just need to that tree's not going to survive, this delicate thing isn't going to survive in this type of environment. I'm getting emotional. I love this book so much. It is just my favorite book. And again, I feel really vulnerable talking about it because if you don't understand it, it's you just don't understand me. It's offensive to me. But I just highly, highly, highly recommend this one. I just think that it is the most beautiful book that's ever been written. And this has been my favorite book for 10 to 15 years. I've never strayed away from having a dead favorite book, and I just don't know that I ever will find a book in my life that is the same as A Tree Grows in Brooklyn for me. Next, I have a trilogy, and it is the Beartown trilogy by Fredrik Backman. I think I'm holding these backwards. I don't know if it's the right way for you, but we have Beartown, which is the first book in the series, Us Against You, and then The Winners. So Beartown is the first book, like I said, and it follows a group of high schoolers who are involved within a hockey team or live within a small town where this like high school hockey team is like all the town's hopes and dreams are within this hockey team. They're incredibly talented, and it's like the first time that the, I don't know, sport lingo, but like the team could go all the way, I guess. And it's a very like impoverished town, and so like I said, this like they're riding on this for their community, not just for like the accolades that it will bring them, but also for potential like investors and money coming. Oh gosh, I just had a book fall over. That scared me to death. But like potential investors and things like that who could bring money into this town. When the kind of star player of the hockey team, I hope I haven't been saying soccer this whole time. But when the star player of this hockey team essays the coach's daughter, and so it really divides the town in this like, who do we believe? Like, do we side with the girl? Do we side with the boy? And again, it really divides who takes those sides, as well as following the points of view of some other characters who, you know, were witnesses to this incident, and you know how they feel and how they're trying to cope with it. Characters who were friends with, you know, the star player of the team and things like that. It's just a really fascinating character study. So this follows those main events, and then Us Against You follows those high school characters kind of directly in the aftermath of that event, and then The Winners is the final installment, and it follows the characters a few years later when they're kind of in young adulthood. I just really love this book. I think it's incredibly important. I think everyone should read the Beartown trilogy because, again, it's an important book, and I think that it's one of those books that can change perspectives and bring awareness. It's incredibly powerful. I know that Fredrik Backman is known for his like whimsical, humorous style of writing, and that's definitely still in here, but it is a lot heavier than like some of his other work it can be. I just really recommend. One of my favorite characters of literature I found in this trilogy, and it was Benji. I don't think I've ever felt so much anxiety and like wanted to like reach into a book and pull the character out and mother them as much as I did Benji. Like, I loved him so much. The next book on my list I actually don't have with me because my mom is borrowing it because she wants to read it, and it is Betty by Tiffany McDaniel. This tells a story of Betty, who is loosely based off of the author's, I want to say mother, but it might be grandmother. I can't remember. It's been a few years. But it tells the story of her coming of age in Appalachia as she was born to a white mother and a Cherokee father. I think this is set within like the 70s or 80s, but I'm not entirely for sure. It really highlights racism and systemic poverty. Betty is an incredibly resilient character. When I read Demon Copperhead, I wanted Demon to be like Betty, and so I think I was just, because I thought Demon Copperhead was going to be like the male version of Betty, but Betty is, I just think, far more superior. Even though I did enjoy Demon Copperhead, Betty is just an incredibly resilient character. When Tiffany McDaniel was trying to get this book published, she actually had a lot of trouble. Publishers were pretty much like arguing with her, saying that the events in this book were not realistic, that someone couldn't really experience those many hardships and difficulties growing up. And I think she was kind of like, absolutely they can. Like, it's based off of my mom or my grandma or whomever it was. And it took quite a few years before she could actually get this book published. It is really heavy. I'm not someone who typically like has to worry too much about triggers or things like that. But there were multiple parts when I was reading this book that I didn't know that I could finish it because it was a lot. So that's something you definitely should check out. I think if you think you can handle those like triggering moments, then it's definitely worth the read. I would not recommend something that I didn't think was worth, those reading that. I think it highlights Betty's experiences. But it is a lot, so definitely check that out. But again, I just think it's a really important book about like race and family dynamics and resilience. It's just a really beautiful story. It's one that I love, and it's one that I recommend a lot, but it's also one that I don't know that I will ever have the heart or the capacity, like the emotional capacity to go through it again. Next, I have a sort of historical fiction for you. There's literally a Clemmy hair floating, so I hope the camera's not picking it up. But it is The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. This is one of my favorite books of all time. This is narrated by death, so picture like a Grim Reaper style of death. And it tells the story of a young girl named Liesel. She's 9 when the book starts, and she is living with a foster family in Germany during World War II. I think that this is incredibly fascinating because, you know, a lot of historical fiction books focus on, you know, I think they're set like in England, and it's, you know, it talks about the atrocities of, you know, the Nazi regime and what they did. But I think that this is so fascinating because it's just highlighting the average child growing up in Germany and dealing with that propaganda and the war and the circumstances. And I think that it's just really fascinating. And I think the choice to have death narrate this story was incredibly powerful. This is one of the most creatively written books that I've ever read, and it's one of my favorite books of all time. I adore it so much. Liesel's parents have been sent to a concentration camp, which is why she is now living with a foster family. Her foster dad is incredibly sweet and wonderful, while her foster mother is a little bit hardened. But again, I think I mentioned it, I love stories where we have, like in Betty and in Atrigus in Brooklyn, I love those like father-daughter dynamics, and you definitely get that in here. She has a really great friend named Rudy who stole my heart. You will shed so many stinking tears in this book, but it is so worth it. It is just a beautiful tale of a coming of age within these horrible circumstances and still having that childlike wonder at the same time. Like, I think those beautiful like childhood fun, like whimsical moments are woven in so well within the heavy backdrop of Nazi Germany and the war. It's just incredibly well done. Next is an ebook, and it is A Drinker of Ink by Shannon Castleton. I hope I'm saying her name right. I can't remember because it's been over a year since I read this book. I cannot think of her name, but this tells the story of a young girl within the 90s, and it's all told within her journal entries. So she is, her parents are immigrants from Paris, and she grew up in New York, and now she's in California for school. And she feels a lot of anxiety and stress being so far away from her family because her mother had been very ill, like I think quite close to terminally ill, when the main character was younger. And I hate that I can't remember her name. And her parents didn't tell her, and it just causes a lot of anxiety for her. She feels that her family is getting quite distant from her, and she has a lot of anxiety and fear over if her mother is sick. It's definitely the eldest daughter type of thing, like the need to take care of your family and provide for your family. Like, I think if you are an eldest daughter, you will relate to her in those circumstances so much. Obviously, this is set in the 90s. She can't just hop on Zoom or Skype or whatever and like communicate with her family. She has to communicate by letters and phone calls through like a dorm phone. All the while she's doing this, she is studying to be a poet, and she has, I think he's like a grad student. He's not like it's not a creepy age dynamic, and I really want to stress that it's pure and wholesome and sweet. But she is assigned to a grad student's poetry class, and they just kind of have this little like budding relationship happening. All the while she's like so torn because it's like, I can't stay here with you, like I need to go with my family. And it's just so beautiful. And again, with it being told within journals, you get such like her intimate thoughts on paper, and I think that she is just such a pure hearted character and so relatable. And so that's kind of the first half of the book, and then the second half takes place a couple years after her experiences within this year or semester of college. Again, it's one of the most beautiful and wholesome books that I've ever read. It had like the little romance part had me like giggling and kicking my feet. I loved it so much, and I read it on Kindle Unlimited, so I will let you know, like in the, like, I don't know, little box comments, whatever, that if it, caption, that's the word, if it still is. So I really recommend it. But honestly, like I said, I read it on Kindle Unlimited last year, and it's one that I really want to own because I know I will just reread it over and over again. It's just a really beautiful coming of age story of, you know, navigating family dynamics and love and trying to balance, you know, those two things while still coming into your own. Next, I have another book that I don't have with me. I hate when I don't have the physical books to hold in my hand, but it is a series of memoirs by Maya Angelou, and it starts with I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. This tells the story of Maya Angelou's coming of age. She was sent with her brother, I think her older brother, I'm not for sure, it was a brother, it might be younger or older, it's been a few years, to live, I think, oh gosh, Alabama or Georgia, somewhere down south. And she lives with her grandma and her uncle. And up to this point, they had lived in like California or somewhere just a little bit more not as old-fashioned and racist. And it really talks about her experiences of growing up in this town. And it really highlights the like atrocities that her family faced and the racism that she faced. It talks about her going to school, her relationship with her grandmother, her kind of strained relationships with her grandparents. It can be quite heavy, but it's also really beautiful. And then the later ones follow her into adulthood when she does go back to live with her parents. I've only read the first 3 or 4. I've not made it all the way through, so I can't speak upon those. I feel very confident that they are beautiful and wonderful. But I will say that Maya Angelou just lived a wild life. Like, it is insane. And I don't know if that was like, obviously from my experiences and, you know, my grandma's experience or great grandma's experiences, you know, would not like give me an idea if that was the norm. But it's just, again, just weaving in atrocity and just horrible moments with beautiful childhood moments, and I love that. And again, the circumstances that due to her poverty and I honestly like systemic racism and things like that she was in, that led to some of the events and circumstances in her life. It's heartbreaking, but again, it's a beautiful story of resilience and power. I think in the later books, like kind of having her step into her own and to navigate better circumstances for herself. I love it. I have not read, I was reading them, I don't know, I think before I started grad school. So it's been like, oh goodness, like 5 or 6 years ago probably now. So I would love to kind of start from the beginning and work my way through a little bit more consistently, because they are that good that I would like go back and reread them to kind of finish up reading about Maya Angelou's life for sure. Next, I have a YA book, and it is Looking for Alaska by John Green. This was one of my favorite books ever growing up, and it holds a very special place in my heart. It tells the story of a young man. His name is Miles, and he goes to a public school in Florida, and he feels as though he just doesn't fit in. So he is obsessed with famous last words. In particular, there's one that says, "I go to seek a great perhaps." So he decides to go to a boarding school in Alabama where his father attended. And it is there that he hopes to find a great perhaps and to have different circumstances. He falls in with a really fascinatingly fun group of characters. This is the first book that I read. I think I was in 8th grade when I read this book for the first time. But this was the first book that I read that I wanted to go into the book and be best friends with the characters. I never wanted like for friends until I read this book, and I was like, this is who I should be with. This is the circumstances that I want, you know. I wanted to be a part of this friend group so bad. The whole book counts down, so you have like 109 days before, and then to the event happens, and then you have after, so like 29 days after. So the whole time you're counting down to this event, and you're like trying to come up with like, what is this event? Like, what happens to this character? I will say that I've not read it as an adult, and obviously I can't go back and read it for the first time, so I don't know. But I will say that my middle school self was incredibly wrong on what the countdown to events were. And then it talks about how the characters are dealing with the aftermath of this event. It's a really beautiful story. I think out of all of John Green's like YA books, this is still my favorite. It always has been, and I think that it always will be. And I think that John Green has a way of writing teenagers realistically. I don't know, it's one that I am really curious to think how I would perceive it as an adult, because, you know, obviously I know how I felt as like a young teen, a teenager, and a young adult, you know, the target audience for this book. But now, you know, in my 30s, like how that experience would be. But this is just one of my all-time favorites, and I really, really, really recommend this one a lot from like all of the ones on the list. We have 3 more to go. I'm getting a little thirsty. The next book that I have for you is a series, and it is the My Brilliant Friend series by Elena Ferrante. So we have My Brilliant Friend, The Story of a New Name, Those Who Leave and Those Who Stay, and The Story of The Lost Child. So I believe, it's been quite a few years since I've read these, but I believe My Brilliant Friend opens up with where the final book starts, where it tells the story of 2 girls coming of age. So one of the girls are getting a phone call from her childhood friend's son, who's saying that she's missing. And so she's kind of retracing back their childhood through growing up in Naples in Italy. I would say, I don't know what years this would be, 1950s. So it's a very vibrant neighborhood with a wide cast of characters, but it's also extremely poverty stricken. And the 2 girls have different levels of poverty that they navigate. So this one primarily follows their childhood and them kind of like leaning on one another to navigate this growing up within the city. So the second one is they are young adults or kind of late teenagers. One of the girls are married, and our narrator is still navigating her studies. So it just follows the circumstances of her friend's marriage, whereas so she feels very stuck, very imprisoned within her marriage, why our narrator is kind of having the freedom of getting to study and to kind of see more of the world. And then again, coming back to their bond and their friendship. The third one follows the girls. She has left her marriage, and they are the other one has grown up. She's published a book, so it's definitely diving more so into their circumstances of adulthood. The very final one has the girls finally removing themselves from Naples. They have aging parents, they have children, they have husbands, and this is like primarily just like a set within their adulthood. I know that's kind of a very like overarching view and not a lot of detail into what these books are, but there are 4 books, and there's so much detail in so many ways that I could go on and on about them. They are just beautiful stories, and I love them. Oh my goodness, it's probably been about 10 years since I read them, and I mentioned in my books I'm dying to reread, I mentioned these because I am absolutely dying to come back to these books. There's something about Ferrante that screams summer to me, so I would really like to come back to these next summer. Next, I have another YA book, and it is The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. This tells the story of Ponyboy Curtis and his coming of age. This really highlights poverty. So I think this is set in the 50s. His town has 2 gangs. There are the Greasers, which is his kind of gang or found family element. They're called the Greasers because of the way they slick back their hair. And they kind of have little petty disputes, little petty pranks with the wealthier side of town, which is the Socias. I think it stands for like socials or something like that. I don't remember. Eventually, kind of their like petty pranks, their events get really out of hand one night, and it leads to just this really tragic experience. So It follows Ponyboy and how he navigates this within that aftermath of that, and it really forces him to grow up. Again, I think this really highlights poverty. Ponyboy is an orphan. He lives with his 2 older brothers. So again, kind of coming of age without parents. A beautiful tale of a found family. I put this in my books that I want to reread too, because I don't think I've read this book as an adult. I think the last time I read it was when I was an undergrad. But I think like S.E. Hinton was like 16 when she published this book, which I just think is incredible. And I think, I don't know, is child writing a coming of age story? I don't know. Beautiful. Okay, I have one more, and I've actually talked about this book recently because I just reread it, and it is To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. This tells the story of a scout. She's a young girl growing up, I think, in the 1930s. Her father, Atticus, is a very respected man in their town, and he is a lawyer who's been assigned to defend a black man who's been accused of essaying a white woman, which causes a lot of division and ugliness within their town. And this whole book is told through the eyes of a child, which I think is really beautiful and really powerful. A lot of us have read this book. I really recommend going back to reading it, especially if you haven't read it since you were a child, or if it's been a few years since you've read it. I will say that I had a really hard time like navigating through this one this time. I think just because of our current political climate and knowing that the what's his last name? Ewells have a voice and a platform to spew their hatred on nowadays, and it's disgusting and I hate it. But again, it's just really fascinating to read about these horrible things and the sadness and frustration that like some of the adult characters are facing, and even Scout's oldest brother is dealing with and trying to navigate, whereas she doesn't fully get it because she's a child. I just think that's such a wonderful creative choice, and just really, I don't know, makes it just such a beautiful and almost innocent story in spite of kind of the heavier themes that are going on within it. I am worn out from talking. I did not expect, right now my camera is showing 30 minutes. I did not expect to blab on for this long about these books, but like I said, coming of age stories, they're my favorite and I love them so much. So please let me know if you have any coming of age stories that you recommend that I read, because like I said, they're my absolute favorite. I hope that you found some that maybe you can add it to your list. Let me know if you like any of them or want to read any of them, because again, I'm here to talk about books, guys. But yeah, thank you so much for being here and listening to me babble on about books, and I will see you very soon in another video.